Welcome to this explainer. Okay, so I am incredibly pumped to have you with us today because we're unpacking one of the most, well, frankly, mind-boggling events in modern human history. We're actually going to skip the usual agenda today. Why? Because I want to drop us right into the thick of it, the mystery, the sheer scale, and the absolute disbelief of the Chernobyl disaster. We're going to break down exactly how this whole catastrophe came to be, how the rest of the world actually found out about it, and the frankly staggering effects that are literally still vibrating across the globe right now. Let's just dive right in with this. Back on March 16, 1986, UK Minister Peter Walker confidently stated, "Nuclear power is the safest form of energy yet known to man." Think about that. That perfectly captures the supreme, almost bulletproof global confidence in nuclear tech at the time. But man, just weeks after he said that, an unthinkable reality shattered that confidence forever, proving that just one catastrophic failure could literally spread radioactive fallout across entire continents. Which brings us to Section 1, The World Finds Out. To really grasp the shock of this, we can't start at the reactor itself. We actually have to start over 1,000 kilometers away. Because the world learned about the worst nuclear disaster in history completely by accident. Just follow this timeline with me for a second. It's the morning of April 28, 1986, so 2 days after the explosion. A routine safety check at the Forsmark plant in Sweden triggers an alarm. Why? Because a worker's shoe was highly radioactive. Now, the Swedes quickly realized the radiation wasn't theirs. It was blowing in on the wind. By that afternoon, Sweden was demanding answers from the Soviet Union, even threatening to file an official international alert. Finally, backed into a corner, Soviet TV aired this fleeting 20-second admission at 9:02 p.m. Just a minor accident, they claimed. The reality, though, it was a raging, totally exposed nuclear core. So, Section 2, Anatomy of the Explosion. How in the world did things get to that terrifying point? If we rewind 2 days to the early hours of April 26th, we find this fatal, almost unbelievable combination of human error and mechanical flaws. What was supposed to be just a routine safety test went horribly wrong. See, the operators were trying to figure out if freewheeling turbines could keep water pumps running during a blackout. But under intense pressure to get the test done, they dropped the reactor's power to highly unstable, completely prohibited levels. And to keep the thing running, they manually pulled out nearly all the control rods and literally bypassed automated shutdown systems. So when they finally hit the button to shut it down, instead of powering off, the reactor experienced a dramatic, massive power surge. That triggered a devastating steam explosion, instantly followed by a hydrogen explosion that just blew the 1,000-ton roof completely off the building. Now, you might be wondering, why did hitting the kill switch cause it to surge? Well, it all comes down to a fatal design flaw that was actually kept secret from a lot of operators: the positive void coefficient. In most normal reactors, if the cooling water boils into steam, the nuclear reaction naturally slows down. Makes sense, right? But in these Soviet RBMK reactors, the steam bubbles, or voids, actually ramped up the reactivity. So more heat made more steam, which just made even more heat. It basically created this unstoppable, runaway nuclear loop in a matter of seconds. The sheer intensity of that runaway loop was so extreme, it literally melted the reactor's core. Months later, in December 1986, investigators probing the dark basement of the plant stumbled upon what's known as the elephant's foot. It's this massive, solidified, lava-like lump of a brand new material they called Chernobylite. It was literally melted sand, concrete, and highly radioactive nuclear fuel all fused together. It was the ultimate, terrifying proof of a complete nuclear meltdown, emitting enough radiation to deliver a lethal dose in just minutes. Moving on to Section 3, the human cost. Looking past the hardware, the true heavy weight of this disaster lies with the people. 600,000. That massive number represents the liquidators. These were the brave firefighters, the miners, soldiers, and technicians drafted from across the Soviet republics for the cleanup. Many were incredibly young, and they were working with wildly inadequate protection against invisible, immense radiation. They took on massive, unimaginable personal risks to fight the fire and contain the debris, essentially saving Europe from an even worse fate. Now contrast that last number with this one, 350,000. That is the staggering number of regular citizens permanently evacuated and resettled. The government initially drew up a 10-kilometer exclusion zone, which, very quickly had to be expanded to 30 kilometers. Entire places, like the bustling, modern city of Pripyat right next door, were abandoned literally overnight. People just left their homes, their pets, their entire lives behind, never to return. It's truly heartbreaking. As for the immediate death toll, confirmed data from the UN and the World Health Organization shows 2 workers died immediately from the explosions themselves. Within the first 4 months, 28 emergency workers tragically died from acute radiation sickness. Later on, 15 fatal cases of childhood thyroid cancer were confirmed. Now, it is important to note here that while about 6,000 cases of thyroid cancer were detected, mostly from kids drinking contaminated milk, 99% of those children were successfully treated. The wider long-term cancer estimates, well, those remain a topic of intense scientific debate to this day, but these are the confirmed direct radiological fatalities. Let's shift gears to Section 4, containing the fallout. With the fires finally out, humanity had to figure out how to put a lid on a wrecked, totally exposed reactor. And this containment effort required a monumental engineering evolution. Back in 1986, emergency crews essentially threw together a temporary concrete sarcophagus under extreme radiation in just 6 months. But, it was always just a temporary fix, and over the decades, its stability seriously degraded. So we shifted to the modern fix, the new safe confinement. Built between 2010 and 2016, it is this massive 36,000-ton steel arch that they literally slid directly over the old sarcophagus. It is actually the largest movable land-based structure ever built in human history, and it's designed to keep the environment safe for at least the next 100 years. However, the situation today remains highly precarious. In 2021, scientists detected unexplained neutron spikes deep inside the fuel debris, which meant localized nuclear reactions were somehow happening again. Then, modern geopolitical events added immense, dangerous complexity. The site was temporarily occupied by Russian military forces in 2022, and that included troops digging trenches in highly contaminated soil. And most recently, in February 2025, a drone strike directly breached the roof of the new safe confinement structure, causing a fire and structural damage. So the site itself is a static hazard, but as you can see, it exists in a highly dynamic, very unpredictable world.
Which brings us to Section 5, a radioactive wilderness.
Today, the exclusion zone surrounds the plant for over 2,600 square kilometers. And what's wild is, when you completely remove humans from a landscape for 4 decades, you end up with this bizarre, accidental wildlife sanctuary. But the reality is a stark duality. On a macro level, the ecosystem is absolutely booming. Without us around, large mammals like wolves, wild boar, and the Eurasian lynx have returned in massive numbers. The wolf population alone is estimated to be 7 times higher here than in nearby normal reserves. But on a micro level, that radiation is absolutely still taking a toll. Scientists are finding darker mutant tree frogs that adapted to the radiation and severe biological damage in birds. We're talking smaller brains, tumors, impaired calls. It's this incredibly complex, poisoned paradise where life absolutely finds a way, but at a very distinct cellular cost. And finally, Section 6, Chernobyl's lasting legacy. As we bring this explainer to a close, we really have to look at the vast, long-term scale of this event. The absolutely crucial point here is grasping the sheer volume of this invisible threat. The Chernobyl disaster released roughly 200 times as much total radioactivity as the Hiroshima and Nagasaki atomic bombs combined. Just let that sink in. That radioactive plume didn't just stay neatly in Ukraine. It circled the northern hemisphere. It contaminated millions of people across Europe, completely shifted global perspectives on energy, forced a new era of Soviet transparency known as glasnost, and frankly, permanently altered the course of the late 20th century. Which naturally leads us to this final, staggering question. The brilliant engineering of the new safe confinement. It's designed to last a century. But the plutonium-239 resting inside that ruined reactor has a half-life of 24,000 years. That means it will take 250,000 years for it to substantially decay. So, I'm going to leave you with this. How does humanity responsibly guard a threat that outlasts our own recorded history? It is a profound, almost unimaginable challenge that really forces us to think deep into the future of our species. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. I really hope this structured look through the facts has given you a clearer, sharper understanding of Chernobyl. Keep questioning, keep learning, and I'll see you next time.